Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Project Sanity. My name is Brandon, and I'll be your host tonight. And I am joined by my dubiously named partners, Richard Green and Adair Schmidt. Uh, Tonight, what we want to do is we want to have two disparate discussions. The first is going to be on the Republicans' plan to gut, otherwise known as the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. And the second is going to be on the alt-right's response to a kidnapping in Chicago and how it fits into a larger conversation about Black Lives Matters and white genocide and white nationalism that's going on in America. So let's just start with healthcare first. And Richard, tell us what's going on there.
All right. So, as some folks might have heard, that we had Mike Pence, VP, recently come out, or VP elect, come out and say that one of the first agenda items on Republicans' to-do list is going to be the repeal and replacement of the ACA, as Brandon was mentioning earlier. And we also had Paul Ryan recently come out and say that when asked about, well, what is the replacement plan, that they have ideas and many ideas, and that we're going to hear about them over the next weeks and or months. So, with that in mind, that the hole we have there in what's going to happen with healthcare, I went ahead and did some research, and I found a old Kaiser Health tracking poll from October 2016, so somewhat a few months ago, and in there found some interesting things. One of the things that leapt out towards to me was that for ideas about what we can do with the ACA, one that had majority of support from all Americans was a government option. So some sort of government plan available to a public option is the words that they used, and it actually turns out that the phrasing is really important. As far as when they did the polling, they found that healthcare wasn't even actually a top issue. So it's interesting that Republicans are still pushing for the repeal and replacement of the ACA as one of their top priorities. It came down in last place for everyone except for Democratic voters, who had it just about or tied with immigration at 9% as the most important issue going into it. They also mentioned, as far as for people that think that healthcare is an important thing, for their top priorities of it, eliminating the ACA was supported by less than a third of folks, and most of that was buoyed by 60% saying they support repealing the entire healthcare law, and that's their top priority as far as healthcare. But among the actual top respondents, 74% of respondents said that their top issue was making sure that the high cost of drugs for chronic conditions such as HIV, hepatitis, mental illness, and cancer are affordable to those who need them, which from the early Republican candidates that we've seen over the years since they've been saying repeal and replace are very, very limited. And so, and don't seem to really address much about mental illness at all. And the high cost of drugs is one of the biggest benefits from having a government option or a single payer option. One of the other things I wanted to mention that I thought made this really important was, of the Americans that supported it, 51% of Republicans supported a public option as a way to somewhat fix the ACA. So with Republicans, a majority of Republicans supporting it, and obviously a majority of Democrats supporting it, and it now being a part of the Democratic platform, I'm expecting to see all the Democrats, including Hillary Clinton, who fights for the issues that she cares about, coming out and supporting at minimum a government option, if not pushing for a single payer and settling on a public option, since that's what the majority of Americans want. And with that, I'll open it up to conversation for you guys.
Well, I mean, let's just be clear about one thing. Obamacare, or the ACA, whatever you want to call it, is not really healthcare. What it is government mandated private insurance. So it's mandatory health insurance. It's just that it's a give out. It was a mandatory health insurance bill written basically by the health insurance industry and given to the Republicans in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it's what Romney Care is. This is about what the 379,000th time Republicans have tried to repeal Obamacare in the past, well, since its inception. And if we talk about this, I'm just forced to wonder, what would we be doing right now if instead of trying to defend this very flawed bill, we were how easy would it be rather to defend single payer or to be defending Medicare for all or be defending a public option as opposed to having to explain why mandatory health insurance, why forcing people to go through, and don't get me wrong now, Obamacare for or the ACA, whichever you prefer, but obviously Obamacare has negative connotations as well, has made sure that so many more people are insured than otherwise would be. And so a lot more people are better off. Perception with it is, and so rightly so sometimes, is that it was a give me to the health insurance industry. Premiums are rising for because obviously what you did was you gave an industry monopoly over people's lives, for lack of a better word. And so circling back around, it would be so much easier now if a 60 to 40 majority of Democrats in the Senate, if payer, and if we had pushed for Medicare for all, Medicare for all or public, how much the Republicans would not be able to touch it the way they're touching it. They are able to come out Obamacare now because Obamacare is flawed in a lot of ways. One of those ways, obvious. Some of those ways are more legitimate than others, obviously. So it's not healthcare; it's mandatory health insurance, and
but that's
I don't think.
Quickly, I want to dare to get on there, but I just wanted to mention that it's I think it's important to remember how we got here, which was we were pushing for either single payer or at least a public option in the ACA, and it was a couple key Democrats. The senator from Nebraska, Ben Nelson, was basically threatened that they would kill the whole bill if they included a single payer option, and coincidentally, he went on to become the basically the leader or the chair of the insurance company commissioners. Went on to regulate to help regulate the insurance companies. So I, when you say that the ACA turned out to be a big giveaway to insurance companies, and then one of the key people that kept single payer out goes to work for insurance companies and as the role of moderating between them and the government, the rules and regulations among insurers, I think that speaks volumes to what who our government is working for. But go ahead.
So real quick,
sorry, there.
Okay.
I think I don't think it's a surprise to anyway how incestuous our government and private companies are. Whether that be big pharma or the military industrial complex or the prison industrial complex. Go ahead, Adair. Sorry.
So really, just real quick on that, you said that it would be attacked. It's easy to defend it for certain ways, but let's be real about why Republicans want to attack Obamacare. And I'm going to call it Obamacare with that specific intent in mind, is that it was meant to be a part of his legacy, and that's why Republicans are attacking it in the first place. Republicans will attack anything that does not have a Republican president's name next to it. They want to make sure that no matter how good a bill might be, whether they know it will benefit people or not, if it doesn't have one of their names next to it, then it's no good. Because it has the name of a the first half black president of the United States, who happens to be a Democrat, attached to it, they have to appeal to that dog whistle base and say anything that goes wrong, anything that at all that he champions, anything at all that is even moderate, anything that's even bad, it's bad even. Like, they're going to reject the bad bills, they're going to reject everything from bad to great bills. That's why it's being fought. That's why they're fighting so hard to repeal it, because the racist element of the party, which is the base, the Tea Party, and those other fringy groups that have now even, more closely tied themselves with quote unquote mainstream Republicans, and we'll talk about that more later, folks. They want to see anything and everything that has to do with Obama be torn to pieces, even if they don't even if that means millions of people are going to die, which it does. You're going to take healthcare away from people. You're going to take healthcare away from people like myself who are in college and using their parents' healthcare. My mom's healthcare is great, so I get that. I have glasses. I'm able to go see a doctor when I need to, and not be under crippling amounts of medical and student debt. But Republicans don't care because it's strictly political. It has nothing to do with whether or not it's a good or bad law from their point of view. Mind you, I don't disagree that it's not written great, but let's be real about why it's being torn down.
Well, so I agree with you half, but I think that this is a larger story here. That this is, these are not your grandfather's Republicans. These are not your, these are not even your Reagans. These are not even your Bushes, really. and I'm talking about George W. Like I'm talking about W, not HW.
Right.
Like are opposing it because it's Obama, but they are also opposing it because the Republicans, as you mentioned, the Tea Party, really, they're less conservative and more anarchist. Not seen a bill that they like. And so we have, we're at a unique point in history, I would say, where there is a substantial, and it's not as big as it used to be because the Tea Party is a little bit the radical Tea Party has waned a little bit, but I would say that their ideas and the need to appeal to them has kind of effused the party to the point at which it becomes hard to differentiate between whether they're gone or whether they're just everybody, because there's so much lip service that's still being paid to them. We have one party in ours, for lack of a better term, we have one party in our country that within our national level who that does not desire to actually govern.
Right.
Way they have no real interest in governing, and they're not conservative. I think that we have to stop calling them that, because I don't have a problem necessarily with a moderate type of conservatism when it is republicanism. They are anarchists. There is nothing conservative about them in the sense that we have to their left there exist the Democrats.
Their social
And so
views, you wouldn't call that radical conservatism.
they're
I
like
mean, I would. I'd call it misogyny and racism.
radical
I'd call it what it is.
Well, see, I would argue that radical conservatism is kind of an oxymoron.
In what manner? You can be radically conservative, and I don't feel like oxymoronic at all. I feel like
I want to hop in here. I want to hop in here just on the conservative part, and the racist role is like there is an element of racism in conservatism that would be naturally ingrained in that this was a country of white supremacy for so long. So the conservatives' position would be to to tend towards that past white supremacy rather than change towards whatever would be supremacy. Yeah.
But that's what they want. They are misogynist. They are racist. Like that's what they are. Their whole fucking slogan. Excuse me, folks.
Okay, it's not viewed as that way though from their perspective.
Yeah, okay, so
they just see it as the establishment as being the way it is. Go ahead, Brandon.
I guess colloquially, radical conservatism. You're right. It's not oxymoron, but what I mean is that conservative, when we talk about it from a political standpoint, at least traditionally, is not anti-change. It's just, it's incremental change. It's measured change. That's why when I say, Hillary Clinton is a conservative by every metric, it's that, that's that incrementalism. It's like, I'm not in favor of raising the minimum wage. I just don't want it raised from $7.25 to $15. I want it raised to 10. In a real country, that is conservatism. Because that is measured. So here's my example. The Amish are conservative in the sense that they adopt change, but they just do it very, very slowly. They get together and they meet and they have like a little, I don't know what you call it. I don't know what they're Anabaptists. I don't know what that for me is called, and they vote on whether or not they're going to adopt, belt buckles. And if it passes, they do it. So in a real country, that's conservatism. In a real country, we would have one candidate party arguing, well, we can't have $15 minimum wage because of X, Y, and Z effects on the economy. Instead, we should have a $12 or $11 or $10 or $9 minimum wage and slowly increase it to $15 over 30 years. And the other party would be going, no, it needs to be $15 now because demand side economics and all these other things that blah blah blah. And that's how you engage in an argument or a political debate in a real country. Okay. What we have now is a country where one party is simply interested in burning the whole house down constantly and enriching themselves in the process. And so they raise these things like Obamacare because they know the idea of government mandate. And Richard brings this up, that when you talk about a public option, when you talk about single payer healthcare, when you talk about the people having access to healthcare, correct language that does not include the word government, people are more amenable to it. But when you say, hey, do you want the government to be forced to provide everyone with health care, it immediately lowers people's opinion, and makes people unamenable to it. And that's because both Reagan and to a greater extent, actually during his triangulation, Clinton, they pushed forth this narrative that the government was the source of all evil, that the government that there was not a problem that existed that the public sector could solve, that the private sector could not solve better, more efficiently, because they push forth the narrative of like efficiency. They sort of rejiggered the language of the public sector to sort of reflect the private sector's values when it shouldn't, obviously. And so now people, like, as a general rule, as part of the neoliberal culture that we live in now, people have negative connotations. But you could, like I said, you could offer people like government issued puppies, and they would not want them simply because the word is government issued. It's just that negative brand that the government has, regardless of what is being offered right now.
That's fair. I mean, again, we don't disagree on any major points, but I don't know if either of you have anything more to say on this particular subject.
I just wanted to, I don't think I mentioned the actual statistic for our audience, and I'll drop the link in chat as well, that by calling it a public health insurance option, you get 70% of respondents saying that they support it. But if you call it by adding the words government administered public health insurance option, support drops to 54, but it's still a majority. So what I really wanted to stress is how important it is to be trying to win this argument about what is going to replace or fix or amend the ACA. It should be a public health option at minimum, if not should be advocating for single payer.
Well, here's what,
because we can win this argument, and if we know that the support of the common voting people doesn't actually influence policy, according to that study that was published a while back, but at least it could put some pressure on people that have elections coming up.
Well, so here's the insidious nature of the Republican Party, not Democratic. Well, the Democratic Party has their own insidious nature. But when you read those statistics and you say, okay, people are generally in favor of, health of like single payer. People generally don't want Obamacare repealed because they like especially they like their health insurance, or they are appreciating the benefits of Obamacare, but they don't like the name, or like they have like the brand has been tainted to the point where they can't connect what is actually going on with the bill itself. And so here's what, if they manage to repeal Obamacare, here's what they will do. So set it up in a way where they can say, let's say 97 of the first 100 days. Look, constituency, we repealed Obamacare. We finally got rid of the great black menace Obamacare. And everyone will cheer, the Republicans will cheer, the constituents will cheer. And what the way they repeal it will be, the repeal won't go into effect until after the midterm elections in 2010. So no one will notice any. I'm sorry, 2018. Sorry. I'm sorry. My allergies are acting up, but you know what I mean. So like the effects of the repeal will not go into effect until, or won't be noticed until, let's say, like December 2018, January 2019, after the midterm elections. And so they get the benefit of having the benefit of having repealed the act, and there won't be any negative effects noticed until after. It won't matter anymore. And so people can say, see, we repealed Obamacare, and it had no effect on your, it had no effect on your insurance. Like, not like the world didn't end. Those Democrats were just pushing nonsense. And then in 2019, when everyone's health insurance is kind of rolled back, especially negative, which have an especially noticeable effect on women of color, as Planned Parenthood is also being rolled back and being under assault. Then they will notice after it's too late.
All right.
I think it's an excellent point. And so
I thought that I thought someone was going to say something else like intelligent after me. But
wow, way to go there, Mr. Narcissist.
No.
I'm saving, I think, most of my fire and vitriol for our next couple of subjects.
Let me just add this because this is part of the Obamacare is a great example of a larger problem we have in America, where people are able to disaggregate government services from the government itself. And I don't know what the real ever really being made aware of all the government does, but they are being told the government is bad, and it becomes this very odd situation where you're in favor of what the government does because you don't notice, you don't sort of associate, okay, well, my water is clean. Well, sometimes your water is clean. well, sometimes roads are fine. I don't have to worry about my food giving me salmonella. Well, again, sometimes. Wow. Anyway, my point is this: the government creates this infrastructure for society, in the form of laws, agencies, blah 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 blah. Actual literal infrastructure that largely goes unnoticed by people until it fucks up. It actually fucks up. When everyone gets salmonella because the FDA didn't bother to do their job because they're being defunded, or EPA is unable to actually legislate over water pollution. One of these things,
pollutes water themselves.
And then they come out and they say, well, the government is messing up because they were unable to prevent X. And so that somehow becomes a conversation about how the government is ineffectual, when really it should be a conversation about, well, maybe they just need more power. And like this sort of narrative of small versus big government is so problematic when those terms are entirely meaningless. We're not talking about small versus big. We're talking about what is the size of government that is most do what it needs to do. And so we need to start having a lot of conversation in this country where we force people. It's the whole libertarian argument. We need to start forcing people to come to terms with the fact, well, here is actually what the government does. How will you get it done without the government? How will you pay for these roads? How will you keep your water clean? How will you control air traffic without the government? All these things that people don't necessarily associate in their heads with the government, because the government is largely an obtuse concept that people kind of just abstract away. People to come to terms with, the government does a lot of things that you simply don't notice until it's brought to your attention by it being messed up, or with the Obamacare, people creating this really faux anarchist, faux libertarian argument that people should be allowed to basically be their own doctors. And
I think
frustrating.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think because I know this conversation is going, or this debate around healthcare is going to be a great microcosm of what is wrong with our political entities as they exist right now. I just wanted to make sure to put it on people's radar and remind folks that, like, the left is arguing for single payer. We should be compromising somewhere near a public option, and that whatever Republicans are putting up, they haven't sold the American people on it yet, and they're not going to. So let's win that argument before they even get into it. And
the Republican healthcare plan is that everyone gets to choose whether they want a free box of Dora the Explorer Band-Aids or a free box of G.I. Joe Band-Aids. That's the Republican healthcare plan. Would you prefer that, boys or girls? Would you prefer to have the Dora Explorer or G.I. Joe?
Hey man, they were going to respect diversity, so you'll get skin color Band-Aids of a slight beigeish white color.
Yeah. You'll get a tan, nude Band-Aid. And so, and that's fine. But before we transfer topics, we're going to talk about Black Lives Matter in a second. Before we transfer that topic, problem is less because the ACA was a half measure, and it becomes very hard to defend a half measure, especially years later when the full measure was never actually as a stepping stone to single payer. And now it seems like it never actually was, and that's how it was sold to the left, who was in favor of single payer. Well, we have to make these small steps forward. We have to make these small steps forward because otherwise the center, this sort of mythical American center that doesn't actually exist. Policy. Yes. It exists in terms of the American center. Centrist America exists in terms of ideological, people personally subscribing an ideology to themselves, on a political spectrum. People will describe themselves as centrist on the spectrum, but when you ask about particular policies, they will, they trend towards the left. So this mythical American centrist policy position that we have to assuage people on, and why the Democrats can't ever go too far left because they lose this center, is it's just that it's a myth that the Republicans are not afraid of because they know it's a myth. The Democrats use it as an excuse to not go too far left because they know it would hurt their donors. But and along with this myth of the center comes this fetishization, this obsession of the elite left. I don't know, like it must just be like the center of their freak zone, like, for lack of a better word. With nothing gets the left harder, for lack of a better word, that elite left harder than preemptive compromise. God, like preemptive compromise makes them feel so adult, like they're coming
So
out
I
of
even
the coming
phrased it
out
in
of
that
the
way,
yeah,
It's like I'm trying to appeal to that.
coming out of the gate with like, I'm willing to compromise. I want to reach across the aisle. I work with Republicans really well. They like that makes them so just my God, they love that. And
all right, come on,
and for
real
like
quick, we're going to continue this conversation for the whole show if we don't stop now. Like once Brandon gets rolling, he does not stop. We've got half the show. We've got 2 more subjects, guys.
Last point I just wanted to quickly say is that one of the reasons why Bernie Sanders was willing to endorse Hillary was because they put single payer or not single payer, but government, that healthcare was a right and basically a government option on the platform. That's why if she doesn't come out and isn't pushing for it, then I wouldn't expect Bernie to stick around. That's my. I just wanted to make
all right.
And Brandon. Okay, fine.
Brandon,
you're right. We are going to switch topics.
It'll come back up again in another show, I'm sure.
Yes.
So
we'll talk about this on Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Twitter, that's a great transitional word. Speaking of Twitter, there has been a bit of a kerfuffle on Twitter today because of a hashtag that's been going around in relation to a kidnapping that occurred in Chicago. And that hashtag is hashtag BLM kidnapping, which is, obviously, it's very self-explanatory. So
yes,
what occurred in Chicago was four 18-year-old black African-American, black African-American, pick your poison, teenagers, young adults, children, adolescents, whatever, obviously, stole a van, drove to the suburbs of Chicago, kidnapped, abducted, lured, special needs teenager. I'm not exactly sure of the age of that teenager.
They were all in high school together, so I believe they're all teens.
They were all in high school. They're all around the age. Like they're legally adults, 18-year-olds. I'm not sure exactly how old the person they kidnapped was at the time. A white mentally special needs teenager into a stolen van area and basically filmed themselves torturing him, and then posted it on Facebook. And they have since been arrested and charged, and not charged exactly yet, but they've been arrested for the crime, obviously, because they filmed it and posted it in public. So not the brightest people. And some Nazis, because I refuse to call them alt-right because they're not alt-right. So like at worst, they're Nazis, and if at best they're appealing to Nazis to sell things, which is worse than being a Nazi, because the Nazi's an ideology. Appealing to Nazis to sell things is just you being shitty. I mean, well, yeah, you being shitty, you being a shitty person, and they've used this as a tactic to smear Black Lives Matter in some way when these no real affiliation with Black Lives Matter. And I suppose they've done this because
no affiliation at all.
There's no affiliation to anyone besides each other or themselves. And I guess but so they've done this because, I guess, specifically because in the video they forced the teenager to speak disparagingly about Trump, to speak disparagingly about white people in general, and so that somehow equal.
To my understanding, they said in the video, "Fuck Donald Trump," and they made the kid say, "I love black people," even though he had tape over his mouth. That was that's what's been released. It's disgusting, but and I have an issue with this because it's what happened is, and you said this earlier, Brandon, in our green room, is that these kids need to be charged with a hate crime, but not the hate crime that you're thinking of, you racist. Like the kid was, the kid is mentally disabled. He does have, whatever medical issues that he has that's not been released, nor do I think it should be released. So it is a hate crime. Like it's a person with a disability, and it needs to be prosecuted as a hate crime. but not in the manner that white people on Twitter are getting up in arms about. In particular, racists on Twitter are getting up about racists, Nazis, Klansmen, that whole fun bunch of group of disgusting basement-dwelling white folks.
Yeah, well, and I would also mention that a lot of people are bandwagoners and they get sucked up in that, and they're not really a part of all of that as much as they are a passive, willing. I'm not defending it in any way, but
well, if you're a passive, willing participant, you're a part of it. Period.
Yeah. I was just saying that there's different tiers.
There's different tiers of racism.
I just want to give people credit for spending like their whole lives dedicated towards racism, towards people who just, oh yeah, I agree with what those racist people are saying. I
just don't see a difference.
Richard makes a great point. Richard makes a great point here, and I made the difference. I was thinking to that difference as well. There are people out there who are using this particular kidnapping purposely to own prestige online. They're using it to get more Twitter followers. They're using it to sell things, to get more views on YouTube, to do X, Y, and Z. Whether or not they're true believers is irrelevant. They are doing this for attention. Then there are people who are generally racist, who are just looking for a reason to demonize Black people, explicitly racist. And, no, I'm not. I mean, no, they're all shitty people, but there is.
I'm not even talking about like shitty people. I mean, I don't see the difference between the out and out, I'm an avowed racist, and the person who's just trying to benefit from racism. At that point, as far as I'm concerned, you are a racist.
No, I wasn't. That wasn't the gradation I was talking about. I was talking about the third. Okay. The third level here of people who generally consider themselves to be decent people, but in the back of their head, they are sort of they expectant of this kind. Like they've already Black people within their little bubble of the world, the way they view the world, are inherently thuggish. They're inherently savage. They're inherently X, Y, and Z. And so
white people in America that aren't woke.
No, this not even just white people. Let's be fair. This is like American culture is racist to its core, to its foundations.
Sure.
And so
but I have less. I feel like that particular fear that we're talking about is a white thing. Like that is a white person's fear that a Black person is just going to come up and beat them for no reason. I've literally not run into other people of color who think we're just going to beat them for no reason. Sure, there's anti-Black racism and anti-Black ideologies that go on in other communities of color. You won't see me arguing that point. But I think that particular thing that you're talking about is middle class. Yeah. I've been fed propaganda my whole life, American. It's racism as American as apple pie. It is middle class. I'm afraid.
I'm not talking specifically to the notion that there are roving gangs of Black people looking to abduct white people or break into like white women's homes and sexually assault them. That whole A Birth of a Nation myth. Because let's be honest, like this notion of roving gangs of Blacks that are looking to assault white people simply because they're Black, simply because they're white, simply because that's what Black people do, is a myth that is very deeply ingrained in American culture. Now, that's a very specific thing that's going on here. You're right. And I think that's more of, the suburban housewife, suburban, white person narrative that they feed on. I think that's what they feed on. But I'm talking this willingness, this overt willingness to believe that Black people are to homogeneously sort of group us together in a way where we say, okay, well, these Black people did something. Why hasn't Black Lives Matter come out and to account for this? It's like why hasn't Black Lives Matter denounced this? Why hasn't Sean?
That's literally the thing.
Why haven't Sean King or Ta-Nehisi Coates or Kamau Bell or these people who have literally nothing to do with this come out and denounce these Black people who they've never met, who they've never spoken to, who they've never probably even heard of, definitely never heard of until literally this day, as though Black people are always required to account for each other and each other's actions. And this, this comes down to the ways in which view Black people, insofar that we are one homogenous group, and therefore we're required to account for each other. Like there is no reason to connect Black Lives Matter in this group of people.
But literally. There is, and that's the thing.
Other than the fact that they're Black.
But that's the insidious part about it, is there is no reason for people to do this. However, it's profitable. However, it plays into that, that Birth of a Nation myth that you brought up. It plays into this idea that's so deeply embedded in the American psyche that impressionable, white students, white kids will look at this, will see these kind of retweets on Twitter and think, well, holy shit, Black Lives Matter is out to get people like me. Suddenly they become not the person in a position of power, not a person that benefits from the oppression of people of color in America, specifically Black people, but they somehow magically become the oppressed. And that is what neo-Nazis in this country are so adept at doing. What racists in this country are so adept at is flipping this narrative and flipping it so publicly.
Absolutely. You guys need to stop claiming that you're victims so that we can do it.
Right. Essentially, that's exactly what they're saying. Is they're saying you're not the victim, and I'll bring a personal example from this. I go to Evergreen State College. For those of you who don't know, we have a confessions page on Facebook, and there's one white dude who doesn't even go to the college who constantly gets on there and posts, "You social justice warriors have it out for white people. We have an anti-white society. Everything is anti-white. You don't like white people," and that's garbage. That is the furthest thing from the truth in America right now. America is so far from anti-white, it's ridiculous.
But I just want to broaden this conversation, because you're absolutely right. America is not anti-white, but we have to understand why where this perception of anti-whiteness comes from. And this is not a perception that all white people share, obviously. And so when I say that, I think this goes without saying. And if you feel as though I need to provide a disclaimer that we're not talking about all white people here, then
you're probably part of the problem.
You're not part of the problem, but calm down. Calm down a little bit.
Maybe we should just add that to the scrolling thing.
Hold on. I'll give you one of these. A lot of my friends I have plenty of white friends. But no, so my point is it's easy to sort of like disregard this opinion that whiteness is under assault, that there is a white genocide going on right now, that that white people are being are having their rights taken away, and it's this is also related to the same sort of male rights activism where we talk about the way men are having their rights taken away, blah blah blah. The reason why, we have to understand where this comes from and why and how Black Lives Matter contributes to this. And we have to have that discussion. And the reason why is simply this: it's Black Lives Matter is an assault on the white supremacy. It absolutely is, and the white supremacy is so ingrained into our society, and it's been so socialized and indoctrinated into people in a way that they feel like it's the natural state of the world. And so any assault on white supremacy is, what would you call it? It's unnatural. It's just not the way things are supposed to be. It's it's the same thing. America's a meritocracy. How can you just give away things? It becomes this narrative that evening the playing field, which is ostensibly meant to benefit everyone's society, evening the playing field benefits everyone. More people having more money, more people being productive, more people being educated, that benefits everybody, and everyone should be in favor of that. If you lose out on the short term, you'll definitely benefit in the long term. And I don't just mean by being able to date a nice dark-skinned, woke ass chick with a fat booty. You'll have
Shut
more.
Up.
There'll be more money in the economy. There'll be less crime. There'll be all these things. But it comes down to whiteness is not under assault. White supremacy is. And how do we extricate whiteness, the idea of being white, from the white supremacist structure, and really make this conversation about, well, listen, until Black Lives Matter, no lives matter, because there is an inherent cost to a society, both from an actual both qualitatively and quantitatively, in living in a racist society. There is a cost there.
Here's something I want to touch on.
Sorry, what did you
say? I want to touch on this because you bring up the point that we have to extricate whiteness from white supremacy. That's nothing Black folks or any other person of color can do. We cannot extricate whiteness from white supremacy for white people. White people have to sit down and take a look and be like, hold on, wait a second. I'm realizing, or they have to be, they have to be woke enough. And I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna come in a lot of places, it's gonna come from just a regular, everyday, middle class white person who's like, whoa, you know what? I'm realizing things are pretty messed up here. But a lot of it's also going to have to come from that white person that dates somebody super woke, like they start wearing dashikis and all that other fun stuff.
I'm not
just
down
going
with
out quoting Erykah Badu.
Even I don't want to do that. And no offense to people who wear dashikis and quote Erykah Badu, but like no thanks.
Like, but that's what's gonna happen.
I want to go home and watch.
Like, you're gonna have to see more. You're gonna see more of those kind of folks, and then it's gonna spread. But we can't do it. Like, we don't have that ability, because anytime we attack white supremacy, it looks like we're attacking whiteness, and that's part of the narrative of these Twitter trolls. Of taking this tragic event that actually happened to a young kid, somebody that needs to be protected because he is in a disadvantaged group.
Absolutely, and
they're twisting it to their narrative.
Yeah, and let's speak on. I'm going to speak on that very briefly about him. This is a hate crime. He was probably, well, we don't know if he was targeted specifically because he was disabled, but it seems as though they knew he was disabled when they targeted him. I think that, by going to school with him, they knew that he was mentally disabled, and that is a hate crime. And we do need to start.
I just wanted to mention our producers showing us that CNN's reporting that they have been charged with hate crimes and kidnapping.
Yeah, so we do need to start having these conversations about these. Not arbitrary. What's the word I'm looking for? These other hate crimes that are not LGBTQ related, race related, religion related, and gender related. These hate crimes on the elderly, hate crimes on the mentally disabled. These sort of not silent minority groups or silent oppressed groups, but these groups that when we think of who's being oppressed, we don't necessarily they don't jump to our heads. So we do have to hold people accountable for that as well. But I do want to speak briefly. So I do want to speak again. I want to talk more about what Black Lives Matter is an assault on. So we speak, Black Lives Matter is definitely an assault on the white supremacy, but more than that, Black Lives Matter is an assault on the United States of amnesia. The United States of being able to forget that these things are going on. And so what I love most about Black Lives Matter is that before, better than anything I've seen in the past, in my lifetime, definitely, they have broken this cycle of perpetration and outrage, and then going back to sleep, and then apathy. They've broken us out of the cycle of, well, there's a video of some black person getting their ass beat by the cops. Everyone gets outraged for 15 days, and then a few hours later, everyone forgets because something else has happened. And what Black Lives Matter does, it keeps this conversation in our heads. It keeps it going. It prevents us from forgetting, and that does, let's be honest, that pisses a lot of people off. Being unable to pretend, because Black Lives Matter better than anything else, it dispels this myth of racial equality in America. And so let's talk about this assault on white supremacy. I'm always very tickled when people complain about safe spaces, whether they be safe spaces on college campuses or safe spaces, symbolic safe spaces like BET, where it's all black programming, or the BET Awards. These quote unquote safe spaces where no one can handle criticism, and the social justice warriors will get offended. Well, let's be very clear. These places are only safe, quote unquote, internally, because we've seen, Dylan Roof shot up a church, a black church, like that which I would consider to be a safe space. Externally, these spaces are not safe from anything, because what these spaces are is ultimately they're just little islands in a sea of the larger safe space that is America. And let's be honest, America is a safe space for white supremacist thought. America is a safe space for male supremacist thought. So it's a safe place for ableism. It's a safe place for these ideas that they go beyond. At some point, they are no longer considered ideological. They're no longer considered problematic. They are just the way things are. And so it becomes hard to convince people, like, listen, America itself is a safe space. And if you don't understand how that's true, look at the response to Black Lives Matter. Look at the outrage that these people are talking about race in a way that is, antagonistic towards the white supremacist system. Look how they talk about how black people are not held down because of their quote unquote culture, but because of the the structure of oppression that has existed since America was founded. And you understand that there are certain things that are taboo to talk about in America because they upset people who want to believe that certain things are true. Okay, go ahead. Sorry,
because I want to transition real quick, because we're getting to that point in the show, but because you touched on something that I really want to talk about, and it's going to transition really well to the next topic, is that outrage, right? That outrage over people saying this, that outrage over this and that. And so I want to talk about that outrage over the Drexler professor who tweeted, "All I want for Christmas is white genocide." It makes, like, the term makes me laugh as a Black person. So let me explain to you folks at home that don't know or aren't familiar with the term and B, the story. So the professor for Drexler is a professor of sociology. Drexler is a university in Philadelphia, and he was responding to a neo-Nazi white nationalist account on Twitter that was talking about white genocide. Their definition of white genocide is this: interracial marriage, interracial children, i.e. myself, immigration, anything that basically doesn't uphold that white supremacy, anything that doesn't say the United States needs to be a country strictly for white people, Europe is only for white people, everyone else get the fuck out. That is what they mean by white genocide. So when people got upset by it, that's what made me laugh. Because that branding is so powerful. Because they use the word genocide, because when we think of genocide, we think of actual atrocities committed against groups of people. We think of Native Americans, we think of Black folks, we think of the Holocaust. We think of actual things done to real people who have been oppressed.
Well, okay, so
neo-Nazis jump on it perfectly.
No, yeah, of course, but and like let's talk about this sort of idea of white genocide for what it really is, and it's like it's intrinsically linked to a lot of things. I would also link it to something like, American exceptionalism, which is another bullshit term, which really just means
make America great again,
or imperialism. So like the issue with white genocide is what it really is. It's white insecurity. And largely it's white male insecurity. The same way that American exceptionalism is really just, capitalist insecurity, and American, neoliberal capitalist insecurity. And what I mean by that is this: it's this notion that whiteness is always under assault from all sides because it's so great, but look at what they're concerned. Look, I'm not going to say what I was thinking. Anyway, no.
That's a first, folks. That's a first.
I'm trying to have a classy show. Anyway, but no. So look at what they're so concerned about. Honestly, they're concerned about miscegenation, like you said, the mixing of the races sexually and production of interracial children, interracial marriage, like these narratives of this epidemic of Black on white rape and all these other things that are not necessarily simply not true, in the same sense that America being on assault from all sides by the Arab world and China, is also just not true. But we're talking about white genocide, it just becomes this very obvious case of white male impotence.
Well, here's
like impotence in a changing world, and the inability to deal with one's place in that changing world. Like look, I'm sorry, they're so obsessed with sex, and they're so obsessed with sex. And like even look at the term cuckold. Like everyone's cucks now. Like why are you so concerned about that? Like why? Like
because
why
that's something that they secretly enjoy.
As someone who casually dates, I don't really concern myself with that a lot. And because so like it becomes these sort of lofty terms of culture. Like our culture is so pure, our genes are so pure. We do, like, it just becomes this very, very sad tale of a group of lonely white men. And again, this is not talking about all white males. I don't know why I keep.
I don't know why you keep pandering to them by saying that. We're just talking about it's white men. Nice. We don't need to. It's intrinsic. If you feel it apply, if you feel the term applies to you, then it probably does, and you should do some introspection.
This becomes less a tale of white strength resisting these savages, and more a tale of just like a bunch of sad, lonely people. A bunch of sad, lonely people, sad, lonely virgins who are, who don't want to have to compete in the larger world, and whether that means compete for a job or compete for a woman or compete for anything, like they
partner. Let's broaden that out.
They do not feel as though they should have to compete in the world in the same way that like in a fair contest. And this comes down to again the false meritocracy that is ingrained in people as part of our white supremacist society, patriarchy. But
I want to talk about that real quick
just finish my thought. It's honky culture, and honky culture, for lack of a better term, is this like it's a very sad story about like impotence and like and struggling with one's own feelings of insecurity and projecting it out. You know, like just get a nice haircut, hit the gym.
Well, here's
maybe go back to trying magic tricks. I don't know. Maybe.
Well, here's
like, take up coding.
But here's why I want to talk about this, because I was reading an article that Anoa, by the way, folks, check out her show, The Way with Anoa. She'd shared on
just
Facebook.
Quickly, I just want to say we're at 5:50, so we want to try to end right around 5:55. So we're coming to the wrap up. So,
all right. So I want to talk about just real quick, because in that article it mentioned that one of the white nationalists, one of the neo-Nazis, had said that if you have a street with a bunch of British people and a mosque and all these British flags hanging from the houses, it's no longer it's not a British street, it's not a Muslim street, it's nothing. It doesn't exist. And that's crap. That's absolute garbage. It doesn't have to belong to somebody. Mixing of cultures is a good thing. That's how cultures evolve. That's how cultures move forward in this world. For a good example of bridging a cultural divide, and if my friend is watching this, I'm sorry, but I got to tell them, because you keep your hot sauce in the fridge, and that's a sin. That is a cardinal sin. Hot sauce go in the cupboard. But we had an actual conversation about that, because apparently that tends to be a cultural thing with white people in America. They put hot sauce in the fridge. Yeah, I put hot sauce on ice cream.
Some people also put ketchup in the fridge. But no, I have a comment here that says belittling white people as impotent, insecure, and frightened is counterproductive. No, I'm not doing that. That's a vast generalization.
If you feel that,
1 second. Well, I will handle it.
I got something to say to them.
No, but you can say it after. It's fine.
Shut up,
I very clearly said white nationalists, alt-right, quote-unquote Nazis feel this way. Is it counterproductive to call Nazis X, Y, and Z, to not try to win their hearts with kindness? Maybe. I don't care what they think, though. Let's be very clear. I'm not grouping all white people together, because that's what let's be honest, that's what the alt-right do. That's what the Nazis do. They try to lay claim to the fact that they're just really representing the ideas of all white people. They are not. The majority of white people are fine people, for lack of a better term. The
majority voted for Trump.
But anyway, the point is this: it's like the alt-right has no claims over whiteness. Like the alt-right Nazis, neo-Nazis, neo-fascists, they have no claims over representing the true beliefs of all white people. I'm not trying to do that either. I'm pointing to a very, very small minority of white people, a very vocal minority, a very impotent minority that feels as though they are the quote-unquote like true voice of white saviorism. I'm saying that they're a bunch of impotent little insecure babies. They're a bunch of little beaver little peas. And do I care about winning them over to my side and like building a coalition with them? No. No, I frankly I do not, because like they were like, I don't believe I can reason anyone out of that kind of virulent, insecure, neuroses. And while I'm willing to listen to what they have to say, like I'm not willing to engage them in some kind of like, meeting of the hearts and minds over whether we can bridge the gap. Like, no, I don't believe. I'll be very clear with you. I do not believe in that kind of radical multivocality where I treat all ideas as if they are equal in the realm of public thought. I believe very, very frankly in ridiculing people if they have stupid ideas.
Brandon, we got 2 minutes, so let's.
Okay, so we do have 2 minutes. I just want to say closing thoughts, and so it's like, so no. In closing, I am not generalizing about white people. I'm talking very specifically about white nationalists, little baby cowards who are mad because because they're just mad for whatever reason, and they are trying to guise their anger in some kind of cultural, historical, or intellectual belief when it's really just sad impotence. And so,
1 minute left, Brandon.
The rest of you close out.
All right. I just send all of your hate mail to @badlefty or hate tweets on Twitter. I want to thank everybody. I want to encourage people to continue to look into the single payer and public option debate, and keep an eye and hold your representatives accountable, and make sure that if you're among the 70% that supports a public option, that you're making sure that your representatives are aware of it. So when they're arguing with Republicans about what their plan is or isn't, that they can be pointing towards what their plan is, and it's going to be that. And also, I did want to mention I'm not producing today, so that was wonderful on my side. We had Dave DC back, and I think we can run a minute long and we'll be all right. So there, you go ahead, get in there, and then I let Dave give him a minute at the end to say a couple things. Go ahead.
All right, but real quick to that person that commented the thing, I put it like this: if you feel what Brandon was describing applies to you, then you might be part of that group. Like it was very clear that he wasn't talking about all white people. On the show, we tend not to make generalizations like that. But in closing, understand, folks, that an attack on white supremacy is not an attack on whiteness. We don't have a problem with white people, but we do have a problem when whiteness is allowed to run rampant, allowed to murder black folks just for existing, when it is used as an excuse, just like maleness is used as an excuse for misogyny and hatred, when teens are abducting and brutally attacking.
Okay, I'm gonna have to cut you off there. Say good night. Say good night there.
Brandon, you need to stop because you didn't know what I was saying. Anyways, I'm out. It was 10 seconds longer, Brandon, but okay.
That was 20 seconds longer.
You took up the whole show. I don't want to hear it.
Dave, you want to get in here and just mention where people can find you when you're not helping produce us or whatever's going on?
You guys, you definitely need the 2 hours. You got to get the 2 hours in, not just an hour. You're watching Project Sanity, the insanity of Project Sanity on a couple of channels, one of which is OurRevolution.tv, and we got another show on Sunday mornings, 10 a.m., The Robust Opposition, also on Our Revolution TV, and you can follow me on Twitter at Our Revolution TV. Thank you, guys. Nice to be back. And just to be clear,
still beating up on you while you do all the work.
My name is Dave. I'm a recovering white American male.
I'm being sarcastic.
And I love you guys.
Thank you so much, man. We really appreciate it.
You.
And thank all of you guys for watching. And make sure you click the link and watch Ben's show coming up next. It's going to have a great show. Make sure to tune in that and subscribe. Project Sanity, Benjamin Dixon channel, Our Revolution TV. Thank you and good night.